Hey guys, tonight we're easing back in time to the perfumed, powdered, and suspiciously well-scented world of 16th century Europe. You're standing in a Florentine courtyard under a warm orange dusk, the scent of rosewater and almond oil clinging to the heavy summer air. A young girl sits in the shadow of an ivy-covered palace wall, fingers stained with ink, eyes too serious for her years. Her name? Catherine de Medici, and before long she ruled France not with a sword, but with a pair of suspiciously sweet-smelling gloves. Now, you probably won't survive this century. Let's be honest, between the plagues, the chamber pots, and the ever-present risk of being poisoned by your own accessories, you wouldn't last a week. But for now, you're just a ghost drifting through the past. No danger. Just detail.so. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're joining from somewhere special, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little history club reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You hover at the edge of Florence in 1519, the year of Catherine's birth. The Medici family is complicated. Bankers, patrons, popes, occasional warmongers. And the smell of politics hangs heavier in the air than even the jasmine. Catherine's mother dies within weeks of childbirth. Her father follows shortly after. Baby Catherine is now an orphan, which sounds terribly tragic. Except she's also a Medici, so orphan still means being raised in palaces with velvet cushions and a staff of about 20. Give or take. You spend your days trailing behind the child as she wanders the halls of various convents, dodging political kidnappings like their surprise pop quizzes. Meanwhile, Florence shifts around her. The Medici fall from power, then rise again, then fall again. Historians still argue whether Catherine's early years in these turbulent times made her more pragmatic, or just more paranoid. Either way, there's one constant scent. The convents smell like lavender and lye. The Medici apartments are soaked in bergamot and beeswax. Perfume isn't just cosmetic in the Renaissance, it's medicinal, magical, even moral. According to contemporary beliefs, foul odors could carry disease, while sweet smells warded off plague and sin alike. So Catherine grows up in a world where smells mean survival. You see her watching the nuns crush herbs into pastes and oils, storing strange mixtures in glass vials shaped like teardrops. One of them even shows her how to make a simple pomander orange rind, filled with cloves and cinnamon. At the age of 14, Catherine is plucked from Italy and shipped off to France to marry Prince Henry, the second son of King Francis I. The match is arranged by her uncle, Pope Clement VII, because when you're a Medici, uncles tend to be popes. You ride in the coach with her as it rattles over the Alps. The journey is long, filled with Italian biscuits, endless Latin prayers, and the smell of nervous ambition. Catherine brings with her trunks filled with silks, rosaries, cosmetics, and a personal perfumer named René. You'll want to remember him. When you arrive in Marseille for the wedding, it's chaos. There are over 10,000 people at the celebration. Fireworks explode. Horses bolt. Someone accidentally lights a tapestry on fire. Catherine, silent and thin as a reed, stares at her new husband, a boy who will grow into a man with a lifelong fondness for another woman, Diane de Poitiers. But that's for later. For now, you walk through the echoing halls of Château de Blois, where Catherine is installed like a prized chess piece. She doesn't speak much French yet, but she does know how to watch. She watches the courtiers, the rivalries, the fashion, and she watches the smells. France, as you've probably guessed, stinks. Even the royal court smells like a cross between a farm and a soap shop that's run out of soap. Indoor plumbing is a distant dream. People bathe occasionally, once a month. Maybe. They mask it all with layers of perfume, ambergris, civet, rose attar, violet tincture. Some of it is sublime. Some of it smells like what happens when a wet dog rolls in crushed fruit. Catherine, fresh from her Florentine upbringing, finds it all charmingly rustic, so she doubles down. She begins importing Italian recipes for scented waters and pastes. She experiments with new ingredients. Renee helps her craft her own personal blend, a signature fragrance with hints of bergamot, crushed pear blossom, and according to a letter, historians debate the authenticity of a faint trace of bitter. Almond. Not ominous at all. You wake up still in France, still among whispers and velvet, and Catherine is now officially queen. Not immediately, of course. First, her father-in-law dies. Then her husband, Prince Henry, becomes King Henry II. Now Catherine has a new title, new power, and a new problem. She's still not the favorite. That would be Diane de Poitiers, the king's longtime mistress, elegant, poised, and crucially older than Catherine. By about 2 decades, you walk the palace corridors and notice how Catherine hovers at the edges of events, always present, rarely center stage. But never passive. She listens, she learns, and she keeps building her network, including a tighter bond with her trusted perfumer, René Le Florentin. René is more than a nose. He's an alchemist, apothecary, and occasional dealer in solutions that don't get spoken about above a whisper. In his shop, nestled in the Rue Saint-Honor, you see walls lined with herbs drying like upside-down ghosts. Shelves of glass bottles gleam under flickering candlelight, some filled with oils, others powders. A few emit faint vapors. One bottle is labeled oil of mastic, another essence of lily root. And near the back, tucked in a cabinet, with a lock suspiciously newer than the wood around it, are his more experimental blends. Historians still argue whether Reen's concoctions were ever truly lethal, or simply misunderstood in a court obsessed with secrets. But the timing of certain events, well, let's just say it raises eyebrows even 4 centuries later. As queen, Catherine finally starts to wield influence, not by loud decree, but by quietly steering the room. You watch her throw lavish dinners where each dish is subtly symbolic, each table arrangement planned like a battle map. She gifts people scented gloves, not just any gloves, but Italian. Leather soaked in a proprietary blend of her own making. To you, they smell heavenly. Notes of orange blossom, tonka bean, and a whisper of musk. But to those on the receiving end, they sometimes come with consequences. One such recipient is Jean d'Albret, Queen of Navarre, a prominent Protestant and vocal critic of Catherine. When Jean arrives in Paris for her son's engagement to Catherine's daughter, you float along beside her into a fine boutique where she selects a pair of perfumed gloves. They're exquisite, hand-stitched, faintly shimmering. The scent? Gentle. Floral, with an undercurrent you can't quite place. Within weeks, Jean is dead. The official cause? A sudden illness. But rumors ripple outward like perfume on warm air. The gloves. People whisper. It was the gloves. Poisoned by Catherine de Medici. Now, let's slow down before things get too dramatic. There's no definitive proof the gloves were to blame. Some letters from the time suggest Jean had been ill already. Others claim she collapsed shortly after wearing them. Historians still debate whether it was poison, infection, or stress that felled her. But here's what you know. Catherine's perfume obsession isn't just a matter of vanity. It's strategy. In a court where bathing is rare and plots are frequent, smells can shift power. Scents linger after words fade. And gloves, those luxurious symbols of wealth, sit directly against the skin. Perfect delivery mechanisms if one. We're so inclined. Back at the palace, Catherine remains outwardly unbothered. You notice she's taken to wearing gloves daily now, even in summer. She claims it's a fashion preference, but you've been around long enough to know better. Every gesture, every accessory, every scent is deliberate. Even the king begins to notice. He once joked that Catherine's room smelled like a garden possessed by ghosts. That was before his sudden jousting accident. You remember, it happened during a tournament. A wooden lance shattered and a splinter pierced his eye. You were there. You saw Catherine rush to his side. He lingers for days in agony, and the halls of the palace thicken with the scent of incense, camphor, and dying roses. When he dies, Catherine becomes regent for her young sons. Now, her real reign begins. You hover near her chambers as René brews something over a low flame. Not quite a perfume, not quite a potion. He dabs it onto a new pair of gloves and lets them dry over lavender smoke. Catherine tests the scent with the delicacy of a woman sniffing out lies. And you wonder, is this just the latest blend for diplomacy, or something darker? Of course, not all her gloves are sinister. Many are simply elegant, beloved by courtiers, gifted to ambassadors. They become a trend. Scented gloves are suddenly everywhere. People compete to wear the most unusual blends: jasmine with crushed mint, violet with crushed pearl, even saffron steeped in vinegar. There's a theory that Catherine popularized the perfumed glove to help cover the less than savory smells of the French court. Another suggests she did it to keep René close, tied to her through necessity. Historians still argue which version is more accurate. You, watching from your cozy ghost perch, suspect it's a bit of both. But there's one moment you remember most vividly. Catherine standing before a mirror, drawing on a pair of pale leather gloves as she prepares for an audience. She smooths each finger slowly, deliberately. The scent trails after her like memory dot outside. The bells of Notre Dame ring. Inside, a revolution of scent is already underway. You float through a corridor now dense with velvet drapes and clove-scented air. The year is 1560-something. Dates blur a little in this dreamlike haze, and the royal court is bustling with silk suspicion and a very noticeable aroma. Catherine, now Queen Mother, presides not just over political matters but over the court's sensory universe. You're in the Louvre, not the museum you know today, but a drafty, semi-defensible royal residence with unpredictable plumbing and an unfortunate rat situation, which is exactly why everyone wears so much perfume. Soap is expensive, baths are rare, and the royals solve this problem the Renaissance way, by drowning themselves in scented oils and powders. As you drift between courtiers, the smells are intense: musk, civet, something that might be honey or might be horse liniment. The fashion is less about looking good and more about not smelling like anything that's died recently. You pass a nobleman whose beard has been scented with crushed thyme and goose fat. He winks at a duchess who's wearing rosewater behind her ears and something suspiciously like nutmeg on her elbows. And Catherine? She's taken the concept of olfactory influence to new heights. Every room she enters smells faintly different: violet in the morning, sandalwood in the afternoon, ambergris and vanilla in the evening. It's like she's curated her own atmospheric soundtrack, but for your nose. René the Florentine is still at her side. Now more than a perfumer, he's become a trusted consigliere. He operates out of a hidden workshop beneath a Parisian chapel, complete with distillation flasks, alembics, and a drying wall of dried myrtle, marjoram, and what you're fairly sure is snake skin. The gloves he crafts now are softer, thinner, more elegant, and yes, still scented. Always scented. You tag along to a court gathering where the elite show off their newest glove fashions. They raise their hands to their noses like they're whispering secrets to themselves. Lavender for charm, lemon balm for clarity, and in the case of one overly ambitious marquis, something involving frankincense and cod liver oil that clears. The room in seconds. Catherine watches it all with mild amusement. To her, perfume is power. Smell dictates mood, health, reputation. Historians still argue whether she believed in the full mystical properties of scent or simply exploited the belief of others. You suspect she didn't much care about the distinction as long as it worked, and work it did. Catherine orchestrates events like ballets. The court moves around her, masked, perfumed, and uncertain whether they're being flattered or threatened. She uses scent as others use swords, with elegance, with purpose, and always with deniability. There's one moment you won't forget. A Venetian ambassador visits court bearing diplomatic gifts, fabrics, wine, and a tiny carved box of saffron soap. Catherine accepts the gifts graciously. But when the ambassador is gone, she sniffs the soap once, then tosses it into the fire. You catch a flicker of amusement in her eye as the room fills with the faint scent of scorched citrus. She never liked saffron. You also notice how the perfumed gloves are evolving. No longer just accessories, they're becoming markers of loyalty. Catherine gives them only to her inner circle now. They're status symbols, and courtiers compete to be seen wearing them. One whispered tale has it that a bishop once returned a pair unopened, bearing hidden blessings. He was quietly relocated to a distant parish the following week. Maybe coincidence, maybe caution. You'll never know. At this point, you start noticing something odd. The people closest to Catherine all seem to develop an affinity for herbal. Sachets and scent lockets. Some wear hollow rings filled with scented wax. Others tuck pouches into their corsets and cloaks. Renee supplies them all. Why the paranoia? Because poison is having a cultural moment. The Renaissance is a golden age for discreet assassination. Not the flashy stuff, not swords and duels. The quiet, creeping kinds. A poisoned chalice, a doctored letter. A glove infused with something invisible but deadly. Catherine never admits to anything, of course. Her gloves remain technically innocent, just luxurious gifts. And if someone falls ill after receiving a pair? Well, France is full of mystery illnesses. So terribly sad. You're there when a servant accidentally brushes his face with the inside of a discarded glove and collapses into a coughing fit. The glove disappears soon after. Renee is unusually silent for a few days. The court says nothing. This is Catherine's world now. Fragrant, calculated, and charged with barely masked fear. She rules not by brute force, but by 1,000 gentle pressures, an invitation rescinded, a perfume reblended, a gift not quite offered. Still, there are light moments. You trail her through the palace gardens one spring afternoon. She stops beside a rosemary bush and absent-mindedly rubs the leaves between her fingers. The scent floats up clean, sharp, grounding. For a second, you see her without crown or mask, just a woman who's outlived her husband, buried 3 sons, and still manages to run a court where even the handkerchiefs carry strategy. She inhales deeply. Then pulls on a new pair of gloves. You follow her gloved hand as it brushes along the edge of a tapestry woven with unicorns, of course, because this is still Renaissance France, and that signature scent trails behind her like a loyal dog. But these aren't just gloves. Not anymore. They've become quiet messengers, extensions of Catherine herself, saying all the things her lips never need to. Today, a pair is gifted to a young noblewoman who's made the mistake of voicing a bit too much support for Protestant reformers. The gloves are exquisite. Ivory leather stitched with gold thread, lined in silk, and perfumed with a delicate blend of myrrh and sweet almond oil. The noblewoman accepts them with trembling hands. Later, she finds that the gloves stain her fingertips, ever so slightly reddish-brown, like cinnamon or iron dust. She burns them in secret, never tells a soul. But you notice she never speaks at court again. Historians still argue whether any actual poison was ever used in the gloves. Most surviving records are vague, and Catherine never left written instructions about such things. But what matters, really, is the belief, the fear, the power of suggestion. A single pair of gloves, sweet-smelling and sinister, could silence more effectively than a dozen guards with spears. Meanwhile, perfumed gloves become all the rage across France and Italy. Ladies embroider initials into theirs. Gentlemen compete to have they scented in the rarest ingredients: oud, saffron, even whale ambergris aged in barrels for decades. But the Catherine touch is unmistakable. Reen's signature style becomes famous across Europe. Understated but rich, floral top notes with a slightly bitter base. You know it when you smell it. Elegant, slightly unsettling. Like a smile with secrets behind it. You ride in a carriage with Catherine to the Chateau de Chenonceau. Her favorite, perhaps because it once belonged to Diane de Poitiers, and Catherine took it back after the king's death. She didn't do it with soldiers. She did it with paper, politeness, a signature. That, and she made sure Diane's apartment smelled faintly like vinegar for weeks afterward. Petty? Yes. Satisfying? Immensely. Inside Chenonceau, her glove collection has its own cabinet. You peek in when no one's looking. There are dozens, each wrapped in soft linen, each labeled with its blend. Cypress and orris, spikenard and fig leaf, honeyed rue. One is marked simply Diane. You don't open that one. She hosts masked balls here, elaborate, candlelit affairs where everyone's perfume seems to speak louder than their voice. Catherine watches the room from behind a half mask and gloves of midnight blue. Guests bow as they pass her, the air thick with violet smoke and expectation. One nobleman, a distant cousin to some duke you've never heard of, dares to mention the rumors. The gloves, he chuckles nervously. You know what they say. Catherine leans forward, her smile serene, and tells him, then you'd best not accept a pair. He laughs too loudly. He also leaves the next morning for Burgundy and is never seen again at court. By now, you've begun to notice how seamlessly the gloves intertwine with Catherine's larger strategies. She's managing her sons, the fragile monarchy, religious, conflict, and constant foreign meddling, all while planning garden layouts and glove scents like a royal. Martha Stewart, with a soft, menacing laugh, her gift-giving is exact. To an ambassador, leather gloves soaked in iris water and clove oil, both symbols of strength and clarity. To a disloyal courtier, gloves laced with valerian and patchouli, scents traditionally used to ward off evil, or, depending on the blend, to mimic decay. Even when the gloves aren't dangerous, they always say something. Catherine commissions new glove designs from Florentine tanners. Lighter, sleeker, lined with silk and sewn in secret compartments. You watch one design that includes a hidden interior layer meant to hold dried herbs, or powders, or something else. René Acute demonstrates it for her. He slips on the glove, flexes his fingers, and smiles. Very discreet, he murmurs. You suspect the glove is already in use somewhere, on someone, but not all gloves are threats. You trail behind her to the royal nursery, where she gifts her granddaughter a tiny pear pale pink, unscented, just warm. Catherine kisses the child's head gently, a whiff of neroli rising from her wrist. For all her reputation, she is not without softness. She just hides it well. The court's obsession with scent continues to grow. Now there are glove makers with entire apprenticeships focused solely on perfume infusion. Distillation labs pop up in manor basements. Someone tries to patent aromatic hunting gloves, which go about as well as you'd expect. Spoiler: deer do not enjoy being pursued by a man who smells like fennel and burnt sugar. Still, paranoia lingers. People start to inspect gifts, sniff them. Wear gloves over gloves. A new etiquette emerges. If you receive gloves from someone powerful, you must smell them, but not too deeply. Complement the stitching. Wear them only in public. Never sleep. In them, one Countess smart woman starts boiling all gifted gloves before using them. Catherine finds this hilarious. If she survives, she says over dinner one night, I suppose she deserves to. And that's the strange contradiction of it all. No one can prove Catherine poisoned anyone via perfumed gloves. But everyone believes she could. That's enough. You drift again through a corridor lined with tapestries and fresh rosemary sprigs to clear the humors. The scent follows you, powdery, strange, familiar. You're not sure if it's comforting or unnerving. Anymore, probably both. You're gliding now through a quieter corner of the palace. Reen's workshop is humming, and you pause at the heavy wooden door partly ajar to take in the scent wafting out. It's hard to describe, like someone tried to bottle springtime, but left it too long in a sunbeam dot inside. Renee is hunched over a copper still. The flames flicker gently beneath a glass coil, and a thin stream of liquid drips into a beaker, each drop a memory of crushed petals and burned roots. He glances up, mutters something in Florentine dialect, and returns to the task with monastic focus. You take in the clutter. Bundles of herbs hang from ceiling beams, parchment recipe scrolls peek from drawers, and near the hearth, several pairs of gloves lie turned inside out, each drying over a tray of heated pebbles and rosewood. Renee is more than just a perfumer now. He's part chemist, part confidant, and possibly part sorcerer depending on who you ask. He makes tinctures, salves, tonics. And of course gloves. Always gloves. Tonight's batch, you notice, is different. The gloves have been soaked in something dark and herbaceous. You lean closer. There's clove, definitely clove, maybe wormwood, and a top note of something almost metallic, like rust softened by violets. You float back as Catherine enters. Her expression is cool, controlled, but her voice is warm. Too strong, she murmurs. Renee nods, adds a single drop of some clear fluid, and the entire mixture changes. The glove now smells like late summer dry, faintly dusty, with just a hint of something sweet and unfamiliar. Catherine inhales. Better. These gloves are not for fashion. They are tools, deliverables, and they are part of a broader web of unspoken influence she's been spinning since the day she arrived in France. You trail her the next morning to a private audience chamber. The floor creaks beneath thick carpets, and the air is scented with lemon balm and fresh ink. A diplomat from the Holy Roman Empire is waiting, his sleeves too tight, his powdered wig starting to itch. They speak in circles, as diplomats do, about grain, trade routes, and dowries. Catherine listens politely. Then, at just the right moment, she produces a small velvet box. Inside, a pair of gloves, snow white, lightly embroidered, and redolent of cinnamon and frankincense. She doesn't explain. She doesn't need to. Diplomat accepts them with a bow so deep it borders on apology. What's in the gloves? Nothing, probably. Maybe, maybe not. Historians still argue over the actual use of poisons in diplomatic gifts. Some believe Catherine only perpetuated the rumors to gain an upper hand. Others insist she had a small library of herbal toxins memorized. One letter, often dismissed as apocryphal, claims she could name 7 poisons by smell alone. Whatever the truth, her reputation does the heavy lifting. By this point, people flinch at the rustle of glove leather. Meanwhile, Reen's fame is growing. His blends are imitated, copied, occasionally stolen, but no one can quite replicate them. You watch a rival perfumer attempt a knockoff glove for the Queen of Navarre's cousin. It smells vaguely of furniture polish and regret. She throws it into the fire. Catherine's gloves are more than stylish. They are encrypted messages and sent. You observe her choosing different blends for different court moods. Lavender and sage when she wants to appear calm and maternal. Sandalwood and ambergris when strength is needed. Bitter orange and galbanum on days when subtle warnings must be issued. One afternoon, a court physician inspects a discarded glove found near a collapsed footman. He pronounces it harmless. Renee smiles faintly when told. Catherine does not respond at all. And still, gloves are exchanged. At masked dances. At secret meetings. Tucked into bouquets or gifted in velvet pouches. Some believe they're protective talismans. Others believe they're traps. The effect is the same. Uncertainty. You begin to understand the beauty of it all. A gift that makes people hesitate. A perfume that invites and unsettles. A gesture so gentle it can cut deeper than a blade. There's a story you hear whispered through palace walls that Catherine once wore a pair of gloves laced with belladonna simply to make her pupils dilate and her stare more unnerving. True? Unclear. But everyone believes it, and belief is power. Late one night, you follow Catherine to the chapel. She kneels. Her gloves rest on the stone beside her plane today, unscented. Her hands clasp tightly in prayer. Even she needs moments without artifice. The next morning, as she rises for court, a new pair waits on her dressing table. Pale lavender leather, perfumed with the faintest trace of rosemary and dried poppy. You wonder what message she plans to send today. You follow her again, like a shadow with a very refined nose, through the bustling morning corridors of the Château de Fontainebleau. Today feels different. The sun filters in through high stained glass windows, casting jewel-toned patterns. On the stone floors, the air is laced with the usual suspects: wax, firewood, rose, but there's something underneath it all. A tension, like a cord drawn taut. The rumors are back. It starts with a whisper. A lady-in-waiting collapsed at morning prayers. Nothing dramatic, just a brief fainting spell, perhaps two tightly laced corsets, the usual explanation. But then, another courtier claims her gloves had a strange odor, like lavender left out in the rain. You're nearby when Catherine hears. She says nothing, just lifts one gloved hand and rests it against her cheek. The scent from her fingers is soft, almost sleepy, probably chamomile and a touch of tonka bean. Nothing about her seems alarmed, but you know better. The whispers multiply. Someone heard that a merchant in Marseille sold a crate of almond-scented gloves and then promptly vanished. A page boy swears he saw René crushing beetles in his laboratory, allegedly for pigment, but also, maybe not. And a physician claims the liver of the fainted lady-in-waiting was too soft on examination. Bit rude, really. Historians still argue whether Catherine encouraged this atmosphere of dread or simply thrived in it. Some say the fear kept the fracturing French court together, bound not by loyalty, but by caution. Others suggest she enjoyed the theater of it all. After all, there is something rather convenient about being underestimated because your weapon smells like citrus. You trail her into a small side room later that day. The door closes behind you, muffling the court's gossip. Inside is René, already waiting. His apron is dusted with something grayish-green, and his sleeves are rolled back to the elbow. Mandrake root again? She asks. Ren acute nods, carefully mixing a viscous syrup into a tiny glass bottle. The scent is earthy, a little like parsnips left in a cupboard too long. Catherine watches without blinking. Then she picks up a thin glove and dips her finger into the mixture. Just a touch. You half expect her to flinch, but she doesn't. She simply waits, observes, notes the texture, the absorption rate, the scent's persistence. She isn't trying to kill anyone today. Not directly. She's experimenting. Glove poisoning, if it ever happened, wasn't some dramatic gesture. It would have been about dosage, contact time, skin moisture, whether the recipient wore silk liners underneath, whether they rubbed there, eyes after, whether they had enemies willing to nudge things along. It was all about quiet variables, and Catherine understood. Quiet power. You wander through the gardens while she walks arm in arm with her daughter Marguerite, known to most as Margot. They talk about poetry, politics, and perfume. Margot favors lighter scents, orris root, lemon peel, crushed lilac. Her mother listens, corrects gently, suggests a dash of cedarwood for complexity. This scene is idyllic until you remember Margot's upcoming marriage is supposed to unite Protestants and Catholics. The tension is thicker than any perfume. The air practically trembles. And the gloves? Catherine sends a pair ahead of the wedding. A token of peace, she writes. They are delivered with fanfare, unwrapped with care. Pale cream, laced with gold, scented with hyacinth and mint. But mint hides bitterness well. Everyone knows that. The recipient, Henry of Navarre, is cautious. He smiles, thanks her, and hands them immediately to an advisor. You follow the gloves as they're locked away, and later, burned with incense in the fire. Nothing happens. But the message is clear. No one is safe. Or rather, everyone must pretend they might not be. Later, as the infamous St. Bartholomew's Day massacre unfolds, blood and fear flood the streets of Paris. You drift through the chaos like smoke. Catherine is in her rooms, pacing, gloves off. Her fingers tremble slightly as she clasps them together. Renee stands silently by the window. No perfumes today. Just the sour, sweet smell of fear, metal, and the city tearing itself apart. There's no proof Catherine planned it. No proof she didn't. Historians still argue whether she lit the match, or simply watched the bonfire from a safe distance. You hover close as she slips on her gloves again, this time dark. Simple, unadorned. The scent is rosemary and pine. Clean, almost apologetic. Almost. In the days that follow, more gloves are sent out. Consolation gifts, some say. Others call them warnings. Reen's workshop works through the night. A cardinal opens his and collapses 2 days later. Stroke, the physician says. The court draws its own conclusions. By now, the glove has become legend. A whisper of death tucked into a symbol of grace. The perfect paradox. And you? You begin to wonder, how many of these stories are true? Or does it even matter? Because in a court ruled by scent and silence, fear is as powerful as fact. You glide beside her again, Catherine, Queen Mother, matriarch of a kingdom that feels more like a simmering stew than a stable throne. France in the late 16th century is a place of contradictions. Renaissance elegance and Civil War violence, lavish balls and religious slaughters. And through it all, Catherine continues to drift from room to room, wearing gloves that somehow speak louder than any decree. Today you find yourself walking through the Palais des Tuileries, Catherine's pet project. She had it built not just as a residence, but as a stage. Wide corridors for grand entrances, private staircases for strategic exits, and gardens meticulously designed, fragrant, and with conveniently hidden corners for whispers and glances and threats. Maid in passing, Catherine strolls through the rose maze with a visiting noblewoman, chatting lightly about wedding alliances while their hands glide over the velvet petals. You trail behind, noting the perfumed sachets each woman wears at her waist. Fashionable, yes, but also protective, or at least that's what the court alchemists claim. Ward off plague, they say. Ward off poison, others mutter. You suspect it's a bit of both. And then Jean d'Albret returns to your mind. Queen of Navarre, powerful, Protestant, mother of Henry, who would someday become Henry IV of France. But at this moment in history, she is simply a formidable obstacle to Catherine's plans. You remember the boutique. Jean had come to Paris for the marriage negotiations. It was tense. She had her suspicions, but she also had a fondness for Italian leather. Catherine, ever gracious, recommended a shop. Not her own gift, of course, just advice. The gloves were pale, floral-scented, delicate. Jean took them herself, wore them, admired them, and shortly after, she became ill. Historians still argue over this one: poison gloves, or just a convenient coincidence. Contemporary accounts describe chest pain, fever, and a strange odor in her quarters. But autopsies were barely more than educated guesses, and any gloves she might have worn are long gone. Still, the timing is poetic. Jean, a sharp political mind, dies just days before her son's wedding to Catherine's daughter. And the marriage, now uncontested by a mother with objections, moves forward. A Protestant prince marrying a Catholic princess. A match meant to calm a nation. Spoiler, it doesn't. But back to the gloves. After Jean's death, the paranoia surges again. Catherine's reputation, already complex, tilts further into the uncanny. People stop accepting gifts from her directly. Gloves are opened with tongs. Perfumes are tested on servants. A bishop has his gloves boiled in vinegar before wearing them to court. A duchess insists hers be buried for a week in holy soil. Renee, still ever present, just raises an eyebrow at all this. His perfumes, he insists, are clean. And Catherine never confirms nor denies any of it. You drift into a hallway where a young maid is scrubbing a marble floor. She pauses to pull something from her apron, a crumpled piece of leather, soft, worn, delicately stitched. A glove. She smells it and quickly wraps it again, hiding it deep in her skirts. You're not sure whether she treasures it or fears it. The line between the two has blurred. At court, the gloves have become symbols of Catherine herself, seductive, mysterious, quietly dangerous. Every time she lifts a gloved hand to adjust her veil, people watch. Every time she touches the hand of a diplomat in greeting, the room holds its breath. Every time a gift arrives from her quarters, somewhere in Paris, someone starts writing their will. Of course, not everyone believes in the stories. Some scholars dismiss the idea of poison gloves as Renaissance gossip, the kind of juicy tale that thrives in times of unrest. Others point to surviving apothecary logs and mysterious deaths that follow the scent of jasmine and myrrh like breadcrumbs. Catherine, for her part, encouraged neither. But you notice something interesting. She never discourages the stories. Either. In one of her rare relaxed moments, you see her with her youngest daughter, Louise. They're embroidering together, laughing softly. Catherine pricks her finger, then reaches for a cloth-gloved hand, making the task clumsy. She takes the glove off. There's a moment where you see the real hand beneath, pale, marked with ink and old calluses, but human. Then the glove slides back on. The moment disappears. You wonder what it must be like to be so associated with elegance and danger that people forget your hands are still just hands. But that's the price of power shaped like perfume. It's persuasive. It lingers. It distorts. Back in Reen's workshop, a new set of gloves is drying near a low fire. They smell of cedar and marigold, an odd pairing. Possibly symbolic. Possibly just trendy. But you notice a parchment pinned to them with a note in Catherine's elegant script, a name, and a date. No instructions. No threats. Just the faintest hint of intent. Because sometimes the real poison isn't in the glove. It's in the silence around it. You drift into Paris on a gray morning in late summer. The rain has stopped but left everything slightly wilted, from the tulips in the window boxes to the courtiers' egos. The city hums with the nervous energy of rumors, and one story floats above the rest like a noxious cloud. People are dying, quietly, unexpectedly, and scented gloves are being blamed. The perfume that once signaled grace and luxury now whispers of suspicion. You glide along cobbled streets, past street vendors hawking dried herbs and blessed sachets, and hear them mutter about La Reine Sorcière, the Witch Queen. Catherine's name is on everyone's lips, though no one dares speak it too loudly. At this point, her reputation has become its own cologne, heady, dangerous, and impossible to scrub off. Inside the Louvre, you find her seated for an early audience. The air is thick with the scent of rosemary, symbol of remembrance and musk. Catherine's gloves today are black, subtly embroidered, and trimmed in soft white fur. The kind of gloves someone might wear to a funeral or to start one. You hover near the fire as a page enters with news. Another death. This time, a young countess visiting from Lyon. She was gifted gloves just last week as part of a royal welcome. Now she's gone. The official cause? Sudden humoral imbalance. The court physician announces, "That's Renaissance code for we have no idea, but it sounds smart." René says nothing, just folds a parchment with studied care and slips it into his pocket. His hands, as usual, are gloved. You step outside the room and follow the ripple effect through the court. Gossip bursts like steam from a tea kettle. Some say the gloves were meant for someone else. Others whisper the countess was having an affair, motive enough in their minds. A few claim her perfume was too strong that day, as if it had been hiding something acrid. Historians still debate the legitimacy of these deaths being linked to Catherine's glove gifting. After all, gloves were one of the most common gifts among nobility, practical, beautiful, and intimate. They were given for betrothals, apologies, secret favors. But the fact remains, more than a few of these glove recipients ended up unwell. And in this city, perception is reality. Paranoia spreads like spilled wine. Merchants start offering test gloves, little scraps of leather scented with perfume blends, so buyers can sniff before accepting anything more substantial. Some aristocrats refuse to wear gloves unless they're made by their own staff. A few even hire glove tasters, yes. Really servants who must rub the gloves on their own hands first and wait to see what happens. You trail one such poor assistant. His fingertips are chapped from exposure to oils, vinegar, and who knows what. He claims to have survived 5 pairs so far. "I keep lemon peel in my sleeves," he tells another servant. Neutralizes the bad humors. Whether it works or not is anyone's guess, but he's still breathing, so there's that. Even Catherine begins to adjust. You notice her shifting the way she gives gloves, less public ceremony, more private exchanges. She doesn't stop entirely. She's not the sort to back away from a tactic that works. But she makes it more subtle, less traceable. You're with her one afternoon when she meets with a group of nobles. It's supposed to be a casual garden stroll, but you've seen this setup before. The lavender in the air is deliberate. The benches have been warmed. The gloves in her hands are soft dove gray, and as she passes them to a baroness, she smiles. Not kindly, but with the sort of warmth you feel just before you burn yourself. The baroness curtsies, accepts the gift, and visibly swallows her panic. Back in Reen's workshop, things are quieter now. He's experimenting with gentler ingredients. Lily, violet, powdered iris root. You get the sense he's trying to restore a little innocence to the trade. Or maybe he's just tired of people flinching every time they inhale. One of the gloves he's drying is embroidered with tiny golden bees, Catherine's symbol. Not because she liked honey. Because bees are quiet until provoked, and then, the city, meanwhile, leans into the fear. Playwrights write thinly veiled satires about a queen whose gifts outlast their givers. Street artists paint graffiti in charcoal, gloves crossed like bones. Perfume sellers begin including disclaimers with each sale. For pleasure, not. Potency? And Catherine? She watches. She smiles. She continues. There's a strange strength in being feared, but not confronted. The more people avoid direct accusations, the more control she seems to have. It's a lesson she learned young, and one she never forgets. Ambiguity is armor. You see it again in her dealings with foreign envoys. She offers them perfumed gloves along with her usual diplomatic chatter. Some accept, some decline. Either way, the message is sent. By now, the glove is more than a gift. It's a test, a symbol, an unspoken challenge, and people are growing wary. You pass a candlelit corridor one night, where two servants talk in hushed tones. One says her mistress refuses to wear gloves from the palace. The other claims she saw a man collapse after just smelling a pear. You want to roll your eyes, but then again, these are stories with long shadows. The strangest part? Most of the gloves probably weren't poisoned. Probably. But the fear, by this point, is doing the work on its own. The morning begins in Catherine's private chambers, lit by pale sunlight and warmed by a faint scent of rose and beeswax. She's reading letters, gloved hands turning parchment with slow precision. Outside, the court stirs to life, but in. Here it's quiet. Too quiet. You notice that René is already present, arranging a delicate display on the table. Oils, powders, extracts in neat rows. He handles each bottle like it contains a secret. Which of course it does. Today Catherine isn't simply wearing perfume, she's watching it be made. And you? You're about to learn the art of the alchemical glove. There's something mesmerizing about the process. René begins with the base, oil of sweet almond for softness and absorption. Then he adds crushed petals, iris, rose, marigold steeped for days in alcohol to draw out their fragrance. Everything is strained through fine muslin, then poured carefully into shallow ceramic basins where the gloves will soak. You drift above the gloves, splayed like sleepy bats drying in the sun. The leather is fine Italian, thin enough to move with the hand, thick enough to impress. Catherine favors lambskin. René adds a little bergamot to the mix and stirs gently. Historians still argue about what went into these scent blends. Recipes were often secret, passed down like family curses. Some called for the inclusion of unusual ingredients: ambergris, civet musk, crushed pearl, powdered coral, even tinctures of belladonna or henbane. Were they there for fragrance, for effect, or something subtler? You move closer and watch as the perfumer adds one last element, a dusting of dried rue. Rue is sharp, bitter, and once believed to ward off evil spirits. Whether it actually worked was beside the point. René knew the symbolism would do half the job. He dips a pair of gloves cream, leather with embroidered cuffs, into the basin. The liquid clings and darkens the surface for a moment before soaking in, disappearing without a trace. Next comes the drying. The gloves are turned inside out and laid across wooden hands to keep their shape. Beneath them, trays of gently heated stones release a low warmth. It's oddly soothing to watch, like perfumed yoga for garments. The scent that fills the room is gentle, clean, slightly floral with a back note of pine resin. Innocent on the nose, unsettling in context. And then comes the finishing touch. René removes the gloves, now supple and warm, and dusts the inside with a mixture of finely ground powders. Most likely cornstarch, orris root, and something resinous. But you catch a glint of something silver in the mix. Not metallic, more like moonlight. You wonder if it's just mica for shimmer, or something with less sparkle and more consequence. Back in the main chamber, Catherine inspects the gloves. She slides them on slowly, fingers flexing in practiced elegance. She doesn't ask what's inside. She never does. That's the thing with these gloves. It's not about the proof. It's about the possibility. Catherine rises, and you trail her through the palace to a sitting room where a nobleman awaits. He's fidgeting, hands clasped tightly, eyebrows damp with worry. You suspect he's heard the latest rumors about the gloves, the countess, the merchant from Marseille who slipped. Catherine offers him tea. They speak of trade, inheritance, and the latest ballads. Then, with a smile so practiced it should be on a coin, she offers him the gloves. His hands hover over the box. "They're exquisite," he says. But he doesn't touch them. Catherine raises one brow. "You'll find a fit generous." Still, he hesitates. She leans forward slightly. Is something the matter? You can see the sweat on his brow. The effort it takes to lift the gloves from the box, set them on his lap. He doesn't put them on. Just smiles tightly and thanks her. Later that evening, word reaches the court that he's taken an unexpected journey back to his estate. Unwell. Some kind of rash. The gloves remain on the sideboard. Untouched. You follow Catherine back to her rooms where she peels off her own gloves with delicate care. You catch a faint shimmer of powder as they're turned inside out. Was it mica? Ground pearl? Crushed? Aconite? She doesn't say. She doesn't need to. You've watched the process now. The craft. The layers of scent and meaning. Even the safest glove holds danger because no one knows for sure. And that's Catherine's true genius. She doesn't need every glove to be poisoned. She only needs you to believe one might be. You wander with her memory now, trailing along the polished corridors of time back to where it all began, not in France, but in Florence. The old city smells like ink and citrus peel, warm bread and drying herbs. The light falls differently. Here, golden and a bit dusty, like it's being filtered through history itself. This is Catherine's real origin story. Not a cradle of thrones and poison, but a quiet corner of Italy steeped in books, apothecaries, and just enough scandal to keep things interesting. You pass stone courtyards echoing with nuns' footsteps, kitchens bubbling with fennel-laced broths, and tiny shops stuffed with drying lavender and aged wine casks. Florence is where Catherine first learned that power doesn't always need to raise its voice. That sometimes it's the quietest tools, the things you barely notice that shape the world around you. A silk fan, a glance, a glove. You find her again at age 12, sitting on a window seat in a Carmelite convent, watching the sunlight move across a wall. One of the sisters is preparing a salve for headaches. Rose oil, mint, a touch of vinegar. Catherine asks questions. Lots of them. Too many, perhaps. But she remembers everything. Her family, the Medici, is in and out of power more often than the laundry. Her uncles are cardinals, popes, bankers. Everyone in her life is calculating. Everyone plays the long game. And while other girls are learning to curtsy, Catherine is learning how to send her writing paper to disguise the smell of ink. You follow her to her great-uncle's study, a room stuffed with grimoires, maps, and jars of dried beetles. He teaches her about balances, how warm oils open the pores, how cold herbs can counteract bad humors. It's all part medicine, part magic, and part very fancy guesswork. Historians still argue whether the Medici girls were formally trained in alchemy. Some claim Catherine had access to occult texts hidden beneath the convent libraries. Others say that's nonsense, and she just had a very good nose. But from the way she blends rosewater and sage with such confidence, even as a child, you suspect she understood more than she let on. You observe a key moment, her first pair of gloves. A birthday gift. Simple lambskin, scented with neroli and beeswax. Nothing dangerous. Just soft. Lovely. Catherine holds them to her face and smiles. She doesn't put them away. She tucks them into her bodice and walks through the convent gardens. With them pressed gently to her heart, Florence leaves a deep impression. Not just the sense and the knowledge, but the weight of expectation. Her betrothal to Henry is more of a chess move than a romance. She knows that even as a teenager, you can feel her spine straighten every time she walks through the corridors of the Palazzo Medici. She's preparing not just for marriage, but for survival. When she finally boards the carriage for France, she brings more than just trunks of gowns and relics. She brings a different kind of education, a Medici education, which is to say, she knows how to smile while taking mental inventory of every object, every alliance and every vulnerability in the room, and she brings Rennie acute. You catch sight of him. For the first time here, not yet the grizzled, perfumed confidant of later years, but a clever apprentice with stained cuffs and sharp eyes. He's already crafting lotions and lip balms from odd combinations: crushed pomegranate seed, animal fat, lilac. It smells peculiar, but people keep asking for more. Catherine trusts him. Maybe more than she should. Maybe not enough. It's hard to tell. He's the one who teaches her how to fix perfume into gloves, soak the leather in oils, then wrap them tightly for days. The scent lingers longer that way, and if someone wanted to add something bitter or less gentle, well, that would be between Renee and the herbs. You ride beside her as they cross the Alps. The air is cold, crisp, and stings the nose. Catherine holds her gloves to her face often, for warmth, for comfort, for memory. And when they reach the French border, she doesn't blink. You see it now? The gloves she wears are not just fashion. They are armor. They carry her past with them, Florence's elegance, danger, and quiet menace. And in France, she will sharpen all of it into a blade no one sees until it's too late. It's strange. Though as much as France shaped her future, Florence shaped her soul, and it smelled always of rosemary and regret. Catherine's private closet is not just a closet. You float beside her as she steps inside, and suddenly you understand this is less a wardrobe and more a sanctuary, a laboratory, a vault of secrets where lace and linen sit beside ointments, powders, and small unlabeled bottles that smell like nothing you've ever encountered, and somehow everything all at once. There are gowns here, yes, brocades thick as drapery, velvets dyed so deep they swallow light, but your eyes are drawn elsewhere, to the shelves of glass flacons, the wooden chests tucked under work tables, the racks of gloves, dozens of pairs, folded and stacked with care, each one resting in its own muslin wrap like sacred texts. A courtier once whispered that Catherine's closet contained more potions than prayers. After today, you believe it. She doesn't let many people in here. Only her trusted ladies and Renee, of course, who treats the space as half shrine, half apothecary. You see him now, placing a new blend on a cedar shelf, bitter orange and crushed chamomile, infused into a fine white powder. It smells faintly like paper left too long in the sun. The gloves are organized not by color or occasion, but by scent. Family. Over here, light florals used for morning meetings and polite company. Across the room, deep woods and resins reserved for evening, morning, and quiet warnings. And on the highest shelf, near the small silver reliquary shaped like a lion, are the special gloves. No labels, no notes. Just folded leather stitched with impossible care. Renee lifts one and unfolds it like he's handling parchment. From the Ark of the Covenant, you smell cloves, dried orange peel, maybe a touch of wormwood, and something else sweet, then bitter, then strangely metallic. It pricks the back of your throat like a memory you haven't had yet. He doesn't offer it to Catherine today. He simply places it back. Some things are best saved. Catherine is humming. You didn't expect that. A small tune half remembered from childhood. something Florentine. She runs her gloved fingers along a shelf and pauses near a stack of little bound volumes, her scent diaries. Yes, scent diaries. She records combinations, notes moods, reactions. Rose and nutmeg, too nostalgic for winter. Lavender with laudanum court grew strangely quiet. Amber and fig Monseigneur refused handshake. It's less alchemy and more ... Performance art. But Catherine knows her audience, and she edits her perfumes like a playwright edits. Dialogue. Everything has purpose. Nothing is random. You drift to the far wall where a tall mirror stands framed in gilt. Beneath it, a small table holds her personal blends. One bottle of iris root water, another of civet, still capped, and something that looks like crushed pearl suspended in oil. Nearby, her gloves for the day rest on a linen square, ivory with wine red lining, scented with something like cardamom and faded parchment. Subtle, memorable. A whisper of warning. Just then, a knock at the door. Catherine sighs. Let them in. A young noblewoman steps inside, clearly nervous. She curtsies so quickly she nearly topples over. Her hands are bare. Her eyes flick to the gloves on the table. Then away, Catherine motions her forward and offers the gloves, not as a gift, not quite. More like a loan. A gesture. The noblewoman hesitates, just a beat too long, before taking them. She doesn't put them on. She presses them to her chest like they might bless her, or curse her, or both. After she leaves, Renee smirks. That. When won't sleep tonight? Catherine smiles faintly. Good. You trail her through the rest of the day, but your thoughts keep returning to that closet, the bottles, the gloves, the sense that her entire life is staged from that space, not just her wardrobe, but her weapons, her masks, her spells. Historians still argue about whether Catherine believed in magic. Some say she consulted astrologers and owned grimoires. Others insist she was merely practical, pragmatic, but grounded. After all, perfume isn't witchcraft. It's chemistry, politics, psychology. But when you've watched her use scent to change the air in a room, to calm, to frighten, to manipulate you, start to wonder if it really matters. Belief, after all, is the most potent ingredient. And Catherine? Catherine believes in control. You find her again in the evening, seated beside a fire, gloves laid out to dry near the warmth. She holds one in her lap and sews a tiny pearl at the wrist. Not necessary. Not practical. Just ... elegant ... and when she puts the gloves on, her face softens. She becomes who she needs to be. Queen, widow, alchemist ... and always, always gloved. It's evening now, and the palace is alive with the rustle of silk and the murmur of anticipation. You hover near the balustrades of the grand hall as candles flicker and shadows gather in the corners like gossiping ghosts. A royal masque is underway, a performance of wealth, diplomacy, and unspoken agendas. And at the center of it all, of course, is Catherine. She enters last. That's deliberate. Her gown is midnight blue, embroidered with tiny stars in silver thread. Her gloves match, elegant, understated, trimmed in black lace. They give no hint of menace, and yet you can see people shifting nervously as she passes. It's not what the gloves are, it's what they might be. The mask tonight is themed, the virtues of the realm. A thin pretense for political theater, as always. Courtiers wear costumes symbolizing strength, justice, fertility, moderation. A duke dressed as fortitude nearly trips on his own sword. No one helps him up. You drift beside Catherine as she watches the dancing. Her expression is unreadable, but her gloves rest gently on her lap, and every so often she lifts one hand. Just slightly enough to remind those nearby of her presence. Not loud, not direct, but entirely intentional. Across the hall, an ambassador from Spain eyes her warily. Last week, she sent his wife a pair of gloves laced with dried lavender and angelica root. Perfectly safe. But she didn't say that. And the ambassador has been cautious ever since. Historians still argue about Catherine's use of symbolic perfume at these masques. Some believe she chose specific blends to signal approval or danger to mark allies or enemies. Others suggest it was simply her own enjoyment of olfactory layering subtle messages woven into the air like perfume poetry. Either way, it worked. Tonight's scent is unique. A base of violet leaf and crushed iris touched with a whisper of burnt sugar. Sweet at first, then dry. Then something else entirely. You follow her into a side room where she holds a more private meeting. A duke, a bishop, a young noblewoman whose gloves are visibly trembling in her lap. They're speaking in veiled terms about land, inheritance, the sudden illness of a cousin. Catherine offers tea and an unspoken invitation to loyalty. As they leave, she hands the noblewoman a small box. You already know what's inside. Back in the hall, the dancing continues. The musicians play a slow pavan, the rhythm dragging like the passage of years. People drift across the floor, masks in place, hands gloved, expressions hidden. It's a world of layers, scent, silk. Performance. Catherine does not dance. Never has to. She watches. And everyone else watches her. You float beside her as a young courtier kneels and offers her a folded note. It smells faintly of jasmine. She reads it, doesn't react. Then, very gently, places one gloved hand over it and folds it in half. There are no words spoken. But that's the thing about Catherine, her silence often says more than speeches. You've learned that now. You return with her to her chambers later, the mask still echoing faintly through the halls. She removes her gloves slowly, fingers lingering at each pull. Underneath, her hands are pale, ringed with gold and ink stains. She massages her palms, then drops the gloves into a cedar-lined drawer already half full. Some she are, us, others, . She never touches again. Renee appears with a vial. Tonight's blend for sleep. Valerian, sweet basil, and a touch of opium poppy. Catherine inhales once, nods, and settles into her chair by the fire. The gloves are forgotten. For now, but not for long. You notice something curious tonight. Even in repose, she reaches occasionally toward the gloves. Not to wear them. Just to touch them, as if they hold memory or meaning. Or something else entirely. Buffet? Mask may be over, but the performance never ends. Not for her. Gloves are her gestures, her armor. Her voice in a court that never listens until it's too late. They are diplomacy stitched in leather. Threats laced with rose oil. Messages carried. Not in words, but in scent. And every time she offers a pair, she rewrites the rules of power. There is a tension in the palace today, a kind of stillness that clings to the air like heavy incense. The court is unusually quiet. Servants move faster, speak less. Candles seem to burn slower. Something is brewing. You follow Catherine through the narrower corridors, past guards and half-open doors, to a room tucked behind the chapel. The floor here creaks like it remembers too much. Inside sits Ren acute. Not bustling, not blending, sitting, quiet, waiting. A silver tray between them holds a small sealed box and a pair of gloves, dark brown leather, stiff at the seams, oddly plain. They smell faintly of wormwood and myrrh, not the kind of blend you associate with diplomacy. You settle beside them. Catherine doesn't speak for a long moment. She studies Renee, and he returns the look with the stillness of someone who knows too many secrets to flinch. And then finally, she says it, they're asking questions. Renee tilts his head slightly. About the Countess? Catherine's. Glove brushes the rim of the tray. And the merchant. And the bishop. And now, The king's cousin has a fever. You feel the shift. Not panic. Not even fear. Just ... The problem isn't the deaths. Those can always be explained, but the pattern? That's harder to dismiss. Rumors have begun creeping into places Catherine can't control. Foreign ambassadors murmur about the gloves. Parisian pamphlets include veiled references to le cuir qui tue, the leather that kills. One poet likened her to a scented blade. That one, to be fair, was quite good. But now, some at court are saying Reen's name aloud, which is new. Dangerous. You drift back to earlier days when his workshop was just a perfume haven full of drying petals and soft music. When his creations were admired, not feared. When gloves were gifts, not warnings. Now, those same gloves have become exhibit A. There's talk of an inquiry. An examination of the perfumer's records. Some call it political theater. Others believe it's real. Historians still argue whether René was ever formally put on trial. No surviving documentation proves it. But there are gaps in his personal records. A month's worth of recipes scratched out in a different hand. A travel note that leads nowhere. One royal account marks his absence from court with only the word unavailable. You stay with him now as he opens the small box. Inside is a letter. Not from Catherine, but bearing her seal. It's folded once, simply. No perfume, no flair, just ink. A request, a defense, a dismissal? He doesn't read it aloud. He only sighs. Later, the inquiries do begin. Quietly, of course, this is still France. There are no dramatic raids. Just subtle questions, missing ledgers, a misplaced inventory. A court physician interviewed in private. One pair of gloves, returned unopened, is cut apart by order of the chamberlain. Inside they find nothing unusual. But the scent? They can't quite place it. You smell that? One asks. No. The other replies, but they both step back anyway. You follow Catherine to a meeting with the Privy Council. She wears no gloves today. Just a single pearl ring on her finger and an expression that says she's already thought. This through twice. She's not afraid. She's annoyed. They say my perfumer dabbles in poison, she says softly. And yet not one man among them can identify rosemary from thyme without his help. No one responds because she's not wrong. Reen's knowledge of botanicals, of extraction and infusion, of balance, there's no replacement for it. He's not just the court's perfumer. He's part of its ritual, its rhythm. Catherine offers a compromise. She limits Reen's private commissions. She agrees to have the ingredients reviewed before use. A polite formality. The inquiries fade, but you know it's not over. Something changes between them after that. René acute becomes less visible, less present. He still delivers gloves, still maintains her sense, but he no longer lingers at her side. No more late-night consultations. No more whispered innovations. Catherine never discusses it, but she begins preparing more of her own blends. See her at her dressing table grinding dried bay leaf with the back of a spoon, dabbing at parchment with oils to test evaporation rates. The closet becomes her lab again, because she understands if they can accuse her perfumer, they might one day accuse her, and she has no intention of being defenseless. The gloves remain. They're still offered, still scented, still elegant. But now there's something sharper beneath the surface. The warning is louder, the caution thicker in the air. One ambassador receives a pair and leaves court the next day without explanation. A count resigns his position and joins a monastery. Coincidence, maybe, but in every corner of the court, the question begins to hang. Heavier, is she still using them? Or are they only afraid because they think she might? That, of course, is the genius of Catherine's gloves. She never has to use them again. They've already done their work. Time, as always, moves quietly forward, even in a palace where so much remains stuck in ritual, rumor, and perfume. You glide beside Catherine now, a little slower than before. Her gait has changed. Her silences last longer. But her gloves? Still immaculate. Still laced with intent. She's no longer at the height of her power. France has shifted, fractured, bled. Her sons have reigned and faltered, one by one. She outlives 2 kings. The court ages with her, some more gracefully than others. And yet, Catherine remains. You find her in her study this evening, rifling through old letters. They crackle softly under her gloved fingers. Many are folded with dried flower petals still tucked between the pages. Sprigs of lavender crushed. Pansy, one faint poppy that crumbles as she touches it. The letters are faded, but the scents linger. Nearby, a pair of gloves rests atop a sealed box. These aren't for gifting. They're old, perhaps some of the first Renee ever made for her. You recognize the stitching. One thumb repaired by hand. The scent is barely there now, a ghost of orange blossom and beeswax. She doesn't wear them. She simply holds them like a memory you can still touch. You start to notice how often her past lingers in the present. The glove stories never stop. They evolve. Now it's no longer just nobles who tell them, it's tailors, cooks, merchants. One baker claims his aunt once wore a discarded glove from the Queen's chamber and couldn't sleep for 3 nights. A washerwoman says she knew. A maid who smelled a pear too deeply and went blind. None of it is provable. All of it is believed. Catherine does nothing to contradict it, because by now, her gloves have become part of her legacy. Historians still argue about how much of her reputation was crafted deliberately. Some claim she cultivated the air of menace for strategic purposes. Others believe it evolved organically, born of coincidence and fueled by fear. But when the Queen's silence lasts longer than the court's comfort, people tend to fill the gaps with terror. You trail her through the gardens of the Chateau de Blois. She's slower now, supported by a lady-in-waiting. Her hands remain gloved, even in the damp. Her scent today is subtle, hyssop and sage, clean, grounded. A young courtier approaches, bowing deeply, extending a document for her to sign. She does so, then pauses, glancing up at him. "You're new," she says. Double quotes, "Yes, Majesty." She holds out her hand. He hesitates, just a second too long, then takes it. Her grip is soft. The gloves are warm. Nothing happens, but he won't sleep tonight. That's the lingering effect now. Suspicion so powerful it no longer needs an object. The gloves are no longer feared for what they might do. They're feared because she wore them. You spend more time now in her private spaces, rooms filled with lace and parchment and soft candlelight. The glove collection has dwindled. Many have been stored away. Some given as final gifts. A few simply vanished. Perhaps lost, perhaps intentionally. Renee is gone now. Whether he retired, disappeared, or died quietly in the countryside is anyone's guess. No funeral was held. Catherine never mentions him again. In his place, a new generation of perfumers rises. They know the recipes but not the weight of them. They can replicate the scent but not the meaning. One attempts a blend, inspired by the Queen's original leather series. It ends up smelling like violets and old soup. Catherine, when she hears of it, laughs until tears run down her face. Then she orders her remaining glove designs locked. Away. In one of the final salons she hosts, you watch as she sits among nobles, holding court as always. Her gloves that day are simple cream suede, unscented, or so it seems. But as she lifts a cup of spiced wine to her lips, the air carries something peculiar, not unpleasant, just strange. A mixture of fennel, bitter almond, and crushed rosemary. A few courtiers notice. Their conversation stutters. She smiles into her cup. By this point, she doesn't have to say anything anymore. She simply exists, and the world adjusts. Later that night, she walks the hall slowly, pausing by the window where moonlight spills across the stone. She rests one hand against the glass, gloved fingers silhouetted against the stars. You stay close. You sense she knows you're there. Her other hand, gloveless, trembles slightly as she lifts it to her temple. She's thinking of Florence again, of Renee, of letters unsent, of gloves never worn. The perfume is softer now, fainter, like history finally exhaling. She wakes late now. The rhythms of court no longer chase her, and even the schemers have grown quiet. The once thunderous intrigue of Catherine de Medici's reign has faded to a gentle hum, like perfume clinging to the lining of an empty drawer. You remain at her side, floating softly as the light creeps through the shutters, gilding the room in shades of cream and gray. She doesn't move quickly anymore, but she still moves with purpose. On her dressing table today, only one pair of gloves rests, waiting black satin with a faint sheen, lined with faded velvet. They are old, soft, familiar. She touches them without putting them on. Instead, she opens a drawer you've never seen her use. Inside, a small pouch wrapped in worn Florentine linen. Carefully, with the reverence of someone disarming a memory, she unwraps it. Inside, a pair of lambskin gloves. Pale, nearly white, with stitching that looks like vines. You've seen these before. Reen's earliest work. She presses the gloves to her face, closes her eyes, and for a moment, she's not the Queen Mother. Not the strategist, the widow, the poisoner in pearls. She's just Catherine, daughter of Florence, survivor of courts. A woman who, for decades, held a kingdom in place using nothing louder than a whisper, and the occasional well-scented threat. That afternoon, her granddaughter visits. The child is bright, inquisitive, chatty, full of the things Catherine has long since lost time for. But today, she listens. She smiles. She asks the child what scent she likes. Peach, the girl says, and rosemary. A curious blend. But Catherine nods. Wise choices, she murmurs. Then she opens a small cedar box and removes a pair of tiny gloves. The leather is soft, cream-colored, barely perfumed, just a trace of rosewater and chamomile. Safe, gentle, a gift. The child beams. You realize. Then, this is Catherine's final gesture, not a warning, not a weapon, but an offering. She's leaving something behind, not just a reputation, but a ritual. A way of understanding the world through scent and softness, through subtlety, through silk and silence. You stay near her through the evening. She eats little, writes slowly, then sets her pen down and walks to the fire. She's wearing gloves. Again her usual evening pair, deep blue with silver trim. They smell faintly of iris and ash. Her hands tremble only slightly now as she settles in beside the hearth. No court, no masks, no dancers, no threats. Just Catherine, historians would later write that she died quietly, in her bed at Blois, that her legacy was complex, powerful, maternal, manipulative, enduring. They argue over her influence, her beliefs, her intentions. Some still call her a villain. Others see her as a visionary. But no one forgets the gloves. The stories remain. Whispers in perfume shops, cautionary tales in fashion houses, rumors in old letters. Some say the Vatican still keeps a pair in a locked drawer. Others claim one was buried beneath the foundation of the Palais du Louvre, left to scent the stone for centuries. And you, drifting now in the twilight of her story, understand something more. Catherine didn't invent fear. She distilled it, bottled it, tied it up in ribboned leather and let it walk through the world. And in doing so, she outlived everyone who ever tried to control her. The fire crackles low. She rests her head back. The gloves stay on. The scent faint now, but still there rises one last time, like breath into the night. You've walked a long road tonight through cobbled alleys and candlelit halls, over velvet carpets and whispered secrets beside a woman both feared and forgotten. And now, the palace grows quiet. The fire has burned low. The candles gutter at the edges. The scent of those famous gloves, rose, resin, rue lingers just faintly in the air, softer now, like memory itself folding gently away. You drift slowly through her rooms one last time. The tapestries still hang heavy. The drawers still creak as they open and close. But everything feels distant, as though wrapped in gauze. You pass the scent closet, once humming with warmth and power. Now still. The gloves are resting. So are the stories. You step into the corridor beyond, your footsteps nearly silent on the worn stone. The air is cool, crisp, even clean. There's no more court to impress, no more messages to deliver. Only the hush of history tucking itself in for the night. Outside the great stone walls, a breeze stirs the trees. The moon is high, casting silver light over gardens once planned by a queen who understood that every flower, every path, every drop of oil had its meaning. You exhale, let it all go, and maybe, just maybe, you carry something with you, a sense of how small things can hold great power. A scent, a gesture, a single pair of gloves. Close your eyes, let your shoulders soften, breathe in, and let Catherine's story drift into stillness. You're safe now. The night is long, but soft, and sleep is waiting.